Hey, Rebel Rouser. I'm Alan Voivod, and this is Star Wars 7x7. We're at episode number 1559 right now. And now that we have the first couple of episodes of Star Wars Resistance under our belts, it's time for us to reconsider something that we haven't really considered very strongly at all. And that is the fact that we are, entering a different period of Star Wars. Now, when we talk about how the Skywalker saga is coming to an end with episode 9, there carries with it sort of the freight of the whole Jedi Sith situation, light side, dark side, Force users, and whatnot. And certainly that has been a thing upon which the whole Skywalker saga rotates, that axis there. But ultimately, a lot of Star Wars does not have anything to do with Jedi or Sith, and yes, you kind of eliminate that idea with the end of Solo: A Star Wars Story when suddenly a dark side Force user shows up, but maybe that's going to be something that they start seeding in and around the Star Wars saga, that just, all these little random Force users are going to show up here, there, and everywhere. But I think that would actually kind of defeat what the logical direction of Star Wars may be to some large degree. And that is a world where, a galaxy where we are not really dealing with Force users of any kind on a regular basis, and certainly not ones who are really well trained and highly effective in their use of the Force. We had Rogue One, which was, largely devoid of Force users, except, of course, for that one scene at the end. And also for, the dad joking amidst the dad choking. And, even the sequel movies so far. So, yes, Rey and Kylo Ren, blah, blah, blah. So, compare that to Obi-Wan and Luke and Vader and Palpatine. And ultimately, the original trilogy, just like the sequel movies right now, is very much driven by the Empire or the First Order. In other words, it's driven by military might. It is not necessarily driven by the power of the Force. And so then here we are with Star Wars Resistance, which, unlike Rebels, we do not have a Jedi who escaped from Order 66. We do not have a young Force user who is going to potentially be trained in the ways of the Force. No, we don't have any Force user apparent here at all. Maybe that's an element that they'll introduce down the line, but so far, not the case at all. And so we are left with the conflict between the Resistance and the First Order, and all of the spy game machinations that are supposed to be happening right now with at least season 1. But even then, since we are so close to the events of The Force Awakens, what happens when the first shots get fired, when Hosnian Prime gets blown up? I mean, it's still going to be Resistance versus the First Order, and not Kylo Ren versus Rey, because Kylo Ren and Rey are going to be off doing their own things. They're not going to have anything to do with what's happening on Castellan or the Colossus or anything in and around Wild Space. In other words, it is going to be a military situation, not a Force user situation. Now, I should point out that we're talking about Rian Johnson having a trilogy and the Game of Thrones guys, Benioff and Weiss, having a series. We don't necessarily know whether the Force is going to be a significant factor in either of those particular situations, whether light side users, dark side users, whether you call them Jedi or Sith or what have you, whether that's actually going to play a role. But it does seem the case that, A, you're going to have to go back before the prequel trilogy if you're going to get a significant number of Force users involved in anything, or you're going to have to go way beyond the sequel movies to be able to get a significant group of Force users together. And so the implication seems to be that we're really talking about, those movies also being very strong with the lack of a persistent Force user or a group of Force users involved with them. And that seems to be the direction where Star Wars is heading in general, too. And then you have the Mandalorian TV series, and that is, so far that's a lone gunslinger wandering about the Outer Rim. That doesn't really speak to a Force user. Although, the Mandalorians have been taught how to deal with the Jedi, so maybe there's, a place for something to happen there. we've got the ending of the Clone Wars series, so yeah, we're going to have one last hurrah with the Galactic Republic and the Jedi there. And then the other unanswered story, which, there's no indication as to whether we're going to find out how this turns out or when, is what happened to Ezra at the end of Star Wars Rebels and Ahsoka and Sabine going on their hunt for him. So there are a couple of other light side Force users that are kicking around the galaxy somewhere, and we are given to believe that Ezra is still alive and survived the events of the finale of Rebels, and that's why Ahsoka says it's time to go looking for him. But he's been missing for nearly 4 years, if not more. So yeah, again, ultimately it doesn't make it a significant part of whatever Star Wars stories are going to be told. So in the whole vein of once is an accident, twice is a coincidence, and 3 times is a conspiracy, I think we officially have our conspiracy between Rogue One and Solo, and now Star Wars Resistance. These are the main chunks of new storytelling that we've gotten from Lucasfilm. Yes, Rebels, also a new chunk of storytelling, but that started years before Rogue One, so that doesn't really count, or at least a year before Rogue One. The 3 most recent chunks of storytelling, Rogue One, Solo, and Star Wars Resistance, and yeah, I'm excluding the sequel movies from this because it started in 2015, so Rogue One, Solo, and Resistance start after that, is very much a military or scoundrel-focused, non-Jedi, non-Sith, non-Force user-focused storytelling situation, and therefore it sure seems like the direction that Lucasfilm is heading is one in which we are not going to be relying on the Force for storytelling purposes for the most part. That's not to say that there aren't stories to be told, but I think we've got a future direction of sorts. But if you disagree with me, then hey, drop me a comment wherever you happen to be catching this episode. I'd love to hear from you and let me know what you think. For now, though, that is going to do it for today's episode. So if you are not subscribed, then hey, please subscribe. If you're not supporting me on Patreon, hey, I hope you'll consider that too. Patreon.com/SW7x7. For now, though, it just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for this episode, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
This podcast is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2018 Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.